Well, welcome to Guitar Tales. How you doing?
Hi, Dave. Great to be here. I'm doing very well, thanks. How are you?
I am fantastic, thanks. So this is historic. You are our first guest ever with a cool accent. And
A
you'll say
cool
we have an
accent.
accent, I'm sure.
This the new British invasion.
It is, it is. You're
2 years on.
resurging it.
Yeah.
So you are Johnny Nick and your band, I love this name, Johnny Bullet and the Promise.
Yes. Yeah. So Johnny Nick is kind of a nickname from John Nicholson, which is my name. But I know Jack Nicholson's got a cool name. That's already been taken. So I
Yeah.
never thought that John Nicholson was particularly cool for rock and roll. So Johnny Bullet appeared, but there
Oh,
is a story behind it.
well, I want to hear it. Let's hear it.
Well, it's brief. I mean, it's I had a covers band in London. So I'm from Blackpool. There's a place near Liverpool. So obviously Liverpool has got a famous music history. Don't need to go into that.
Neil
Uh,
Diamond is from there, right?
that's him. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, the Stones are from there apparently. So in London, we had a covers band that were called the Bullets. So we used to have this. We used to play like old Sex Pistols and the Clash and
Right.
Johnny Cash and all these different kind of rock and roll and punk songs. And we kind of took that. The Ramones, how they were always like Johnny Ramone and Joey Ramone. So we kind of when we played, we called each other like Johnny Bullet
All
or
right.
Andy Bullet, or funnily enough, our drummer was from Liverpool, so he became Ringo, obviously. So he was Ringo Bullet.
I love
Um, so the Johnny Bullet thing just kind of stuck, and then I started doing a few open mics and thought, well, I'll just do it under the Johnny Bullet alias, and that's where the band name came from.
And you know what I like? I'm thinking about it for the first time now. The second half of your name and the promise. And
Yeah,
what a really cool, positive minded, it's almost a pledge you're making to your audience, right?
yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of looking at it. And I think that was to try and be positive. I mean, there was always I guess I was thinking initially of maybe just being the promise and just keeping it as a band name. But because we're old and the guys that are in the band, they like to do stuff like sometimes play golf or mow the lawn or do something
Right, right,
not
right.
very rock and roll. So I'll go and play. I don't like to do any of those things, so I'll just carry on playing on my own. So I thought, well, I'll keep the Johnny Bullet piece, and I'm writing all the lyrics and all the music, and we'll bring the band together when we get the opportunity to play live. But yeah, the intent was that we keep it positive, we keep it uplifting, we try and have a strong message in the music. So the name seemed to fit with the output in many
But
ways.
and I have a certain affinity for names like that. I'm realizing now. So one of my bands in college, we had two or three originals, and the rest were covers. So I was annoyed with that. So I came up with the name. We were John Doe and the Generics,
Okay.
which is exactly the opposite of the
Yeah.
positivity and
Yeah, the
creativity in
generics.
your name.
But yeah, I quite like I mean, obviously, like the Tom Petty, like
Yeah.
the Heartbreakers and
Yeah.
yeah, and the Black Hearts and stuff like that. They're kind of rock and roll
All
names,
right,
but
Joan Jett. Yeah.
yeah. So it's I guess there's a little bit of history to follow, but you're right. Sending out a positive message, especially in these times,
Yeah.
that's kind of what we need.
Well, when we eventually get there, that's what I really do want to talk a bit about these times. But just as a segue into it, we'll at some point when we post this, well, you have a great promo video of your band,
Yeah.
and I watched it before I read your little. I think you sent it an email. You sent me some copy, and I couldn't put my finger on who you were reminding me of, and then I read your copy, and you guys really, there's a lot of Clash in you because you
Yeah.
referenced Joe Strummer, but yeah,
Thank you. No, I mean I appreciate that, and I guess Joe Strummer was. It's funny, a kind of a new song, and within the lyrics, I talk about how of another time. You probably remember it the same when you used to walk into town to go and buy the actual record.
there was such
Release.
what's
It
the
was
word
an
I'm looking for?
experience.
There was ritual. There was such ritual
Yeah, yeah.
about
So
pulling through, like going to the record stacks. You regard the cover art. You look at the back.
yeah, 100%, and that's what London Calling is the album that springs to mind, and I can
Yeah.
remember walking into the record store feeling very uncool because I was a kid and there was lots of punks in the store, and I probably had my school uniform on, and I
Oh,
went
that's
and bought
funny.
the record, and I walked back home reading, reading the gatefold sleeve, reading, pulling out, looking at the lyrics, and the lyrics were really powerful, and I think that was probably the first. It was like, there was no social media, so there was nowhere to get your news other
No.
than in a newspaper. So, and kids didn't read newspapers, but we read the lyrics
Yeah.
of bands that we felt were important. And the Clash were a huge influence. And even in Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros, I don't know if you've caught up with them. He had a band before.
No.
And the Mescaleros, they released 3 albums, fabulous, a bit more, a little bit more tempered in terms of the music, but the lyrics were still strong, So he's always been a big influence.
I remember when when you talk about the Clash, right? I could picture us all in high school. We were, all my friends and I played guitar. My friend Jason's, we would sit in his bedroom. There would be always one, too few guitars for the guys. So we'd all be fighting over a guitar. There'd usually be like 2 guitars, 3 guys, three guitars, 4 guys, whatever. But when that album came out, it kind of changed everything.
Yeah, it had so many different musical styles. If you go back to it now, that there's jazz on there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few like piano ballads like Card Cheat. Obviously there's a lot of reggae influence. There always was with the Clash. So
Yeah.
they were a little bit ahead of the time, and it's a shame the way things worked out. And particularly, I mean, Joe was only, I think, 50 or so when he passed, and
Yeah.
you can't think of all the great music that potentially was still to come.
It is. And what do you think? Because I can't put my finger on it, but there was something more accessible about the Clash than the obvious comparison, which is the Pistols, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Well, I think the Pistols for me were a little bit more. They were a bit cartoon-like when you think in that respect. They represented everything that was punk, but without the message. And
Right. They were
they
just
had
angry.
Yeah, they were kind of angry, and they had a few, God Save the Queen and Pretty Vacant. They're all great songs, and in fact, the covers band that I used to play in, we used to play those songs, and I'd never get tired of playing.
Well, Anarchy is one of the greatest rock songs ever written.
Yeah, but it wasn't, there was something a bit more meaningful about the Clash. And of course, they had a bit more longevity. The Pistols came and went in the blink of an eye, and the Clash stuck around a little bit longer, and perhaps things could have been different. I mean, I'm pretty sure they would have reformed at some point, and that would have been quite something.
And I'm a Who fanatic, and I know the Clash were all about the Who.
They were big fans. Yeah. Funnily enough, I saw Joe Strummer and the Mescaleros support the Who in Manchester. So that was my only. I kind of missed the Who and classic rock. That was just kind of passed me by. I was. I grew up in a great time in the UK of the punk era, 77. So the kind of classic rock piece, I feel quite thankful. I never quite got that, but punk onwards was always big for me.
Yeah, it was a really cool sort of answer. There was, I like Progressive also, but I thought they were a great answer to Kansas and Yes.
Yeah,
I love Yes, but a lot of people, a lot of Clash people would hate Yes. They'd hate ELP and bands like that.
I mean, I'm not that. I mean, my tastes are pretty diverse as well, because I could appreciate the musicality of a lot of those bands without really wanting the lyrics. The thing about those, the lyrics might have been memorable because there might have been a catchy hook, but I didn't feel any kind of message coming out of it. So I think.
And John Anderson says he doesn't even know what they meant. He says that. He doesn't know what those lyrics meant.
I can believe it, which kind of took me on. And, obviously it's a good time to be talking to you on Bruce's birthday, because there was a natural progression from, the Clash and the lyrical bite that they had and the message to, Springsteen and the lyricality there as well. So I've always been, that's been something that I've always been drawn to, and which I've tried to reflect in the music that I make.
Yeah, and that's the other comparison I saw in your write-up, that as I thought about it, I really heard in your music is Bruce,
Yeah.
And he's, you know, talk about, you know, in a Sting-like way, but in a different way. He's aged perfectly
Oh,
with his art, you know?
yeah. I mean, I admire. I know the Rolling Stones have been kind of rolling on their greatest hits tour forever, and I think they released a couple of things maybe this year, which was new, which was quite refreshing. But the thing that you got to love about Bruce is how he keeps going and he keeps digging deep and finding something new. You
Yeah.
know, he's still got something to say. He's still relevant, and musically, I mean, the Western Stars album, I didn't really get at first, and it was a real slow burn for me. And then I saw
Yeah.
the movie and him explaining the songs and the inspiration behind the songs, and then it took on a new meaning. So I kind of refound him again on that album.
Yeah, he's, you know, I saw him 4 or 5 years ago, maybe. And to hear The Rising live,
Yeah,
you know, and to hear, you know, in 2001, one could have written him off at
yeah,
that point. You know, he wasn't a kid in 2001 anymore. And
yeah,
he wrote a meaningful song about 9/11 that was as powerful as anything he had written in the late 70s
yeah.
or more.
Again, the whole of that album lyrically is just incredible, you know. So there's nobody else that could have pulled off an album like that without it feeling, you know, cliched and awkward.
Right,
Um,
or even forced. I will
yeah,
cash
exactly.
in on a tragedy, and that's not him.
Yeah, no, it was so natural, and it's an absolute, you know, it's an absolute gift, isn't it? You know, and
Yeah,
I was fortunate enough to see him on the Broadway show, and I was an emotional wreck at the end of that. I was
I bet.
exhausted. It was incredible, you know. Hearing him tell his own story personally in his own words was just wonderful.
Yeah, you know, I will in that same vein. The last time I saw him was shortly after Clarence passed, and
Right.
I think it maybe Rosalita. There, one of their songs that has a sax solo. What they did for a handful of concerts within a tour, they would just be silent.
He
It,
stopped. Yeah. Was
the
it 10th
crowd would
Avenue Freeze?
roar. What's that?
Yeah. Was it 10th Avenue Freeze Out?
That's what it was. That's what it was. Yeah.
And the screen went bright and there was an image of Clarence
Yeah.
and
Right now, I don't know if the camera could pick it up. I have
yeah,
goosebumps.
yeah.
I
I got,
cried, like not like weeping, but I
yeah,
felt the love
yeah,
of 20,000 people loving this huge man who
yeah,
had a gigantic footprint. I still have goosebumps talking about it,
yeah, I know.
and because it caught me so off guard, and it was love on the stage, and it was love in the audience, and you just had this whole stadium of
Yeah,
love, you know,
yeah.
and what a great tribute, you
It
know.
was, and he did very much the same thing within the Broadway show. You know, there was a big segment on Clarence, you know, how the band got together, and it's about his parents, and there were so many highs and lows. And the great thing about it, though, it could have been any of us. You know, he was telling a story that you could relate to, that I could relate to. We've all got, you know, families. We've all got issues and problems, and you know, his like hopes and dreams and failures, and it was like he could have been any one of us, and he was telling not just his story, but he was telling our story as well. And you know, that's a gift. There's not many
Yeah.
people that could do that.
No, and he is, and this is my not so thinly veiled segue. He is what you are. He's a poet who's a musician. You know, and
That's very kind of you to say.
it's true. And but you know what I like is what you infuse in all your descriptors in your art is the words, the lyrics.
Yeah,
And it's not that you're going to poo-poo or dislike a well-crafted melody with some silly little lyrics, but what speaks to your heart and then what you emote through your music are meaningful lyrics. Like that's your thing.
yeah. I mean, you know, look, there's no way you can be talking in the same breath as sort of Bruce or Joe Strummer. I think I put in the note back to you. There's a guy called Frank Turner.
Yeah, and I didn't get to Google him. I don't know him.
Yeah, worth checking out because he's I think he's another big Springsteen fan, and Bruce is a fan of his as well. But he's more of like folk punk, you know, when he plays on his own as well, and he plays with a band. Very exciting, very strong lyrically. He used to be in like an emo hardcore band, so he's got
Okay.
a vocal range to die for, you know.
Right,
So
right.
So yeah, I think the lyrics are important in to try and get a message across about. I think it was the manager of the Clash. I think it was Bernie Rhodes that
Okay.
used to get Joe Strummer to one side and just say, you know, you've got to write what you see. You know, that's all you can do. And that was kind of his push. That, you know, there's so many things that are affecting us at the moment. It's hard to just write about something meaningless, because it's also hard to know where to start sometimes as to what subject matter to take on. But it feels that is a good starting point by just opening your eyes and seeing what's going on, and trying to capture what you see in a moment in time.
You know, you just gave me the strangest metaphor that popped in my head. You ever see those booths at fairs where someone goes into a booth and a bunch of dollar bills sort of, you know, flutter around? You try to grab as many as you can. It's a stupid little thing. So we're going through culturally, health-wise, and in every other way, just an absolutely horrific moment in time. And for an artist, floating around like those dollars in that thing are all these emotions that you can capture, and it's yours to not, it's yours to fritter away if you don't do what you just said.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sadly an amazing time for an artist like you, because you can grab a hold of just so many things that are happening from an emotional point of view, or socially. You can lend us your voice toward commentary on what you observe.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it can go one of two ways. I was talking to a friend of mine who plays locally here in Hoboken. We were talking last week, and he was almost saying sometimes he found it too difficult because the subject matter was too obvious.
Yeah.
You know, it was almost like, does anybody want to hear a lockdown song, you know, or about, you know, COVID specifically? But it doesn't need to address COVID like in the title, but it can address, you know, a longing, or, you know, when is this going to change? You know, are we another day closer to some form of going back to normal? You know, and wrestling with the emotions that we've all had during that period without specifically saying this is a COVID song.
Yeah. You just came up with two titles: One Day Closer, Wrestling with Emotion. You know?
I did actually do one, funnily enough. There is one called Another Day Closer. I was thinking that as I said it, and that's what it was about. It was literally about we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know where the finish line is, and that's a tough thing to mentally negotiate. But we do know that we've just got through another day, and we're another day closer to whenever that may be.
Right, and your job as an artist, you know, depending on what you want to do, I am not a fan, and I don't care if any of our listeners disagree with me, of those hit you over the head with obvious lyrics songs. You know, I love the USA. No, but I do, but fuck that. That's not, your job is to get the subtlety and the nuance of what we're going through, and to give us insights. If you write a song that says this sucks, I don't like being stuck in here, that doesn't help people. But you're going to, and what you do, and I've heard it in your lyrics, is you get the nuance, those sort of subtle feelings.
Yeah, and I think also the nuances are in, you know, some of the songs. I mean, it was the songwriting that kept me sane, if I'm honest with you. And, you know, I'm in my place here in Hoboken, and dare I say I play piano too? Is this a piano?
You're allowed on Guitar Tales.
So I kind of had a Guitar Tales, which would be my, maybe during the day, where I could, you know, go in the attic and sing and shout to my heart's content and not upset anybody. Then of a night time now, you know, it's going dark, it's a bit more atmospheric, and I could maybe play something more on the piano. And and it was interesting that the different nuances of that, you know, for me, a guitar, I find it hard to write a ballad, say, on a guitar, because you always feel you play the guitar, you're pumped up and you're ready to go, and it's going to be something aggressive or something positive. Whereas on the piano, I'm so miserable. You know, I just, everything is a minor key. And I just found myself, like, when you say about sometimes the time that we've had during lockdown, you know, I wrote a song about nightfalls, you know, as it is now, you know, as it's getting dark.
Right.
And because you had time, and because there was maybe silence that you don't appreciate because you're rushing around in your life prior to the lockdown, that there were subtle things that you heard about as it's getting darker, and the noises from the street and the conversations in the street that you would never have picked up on before, you know. So there were interesting little things that came out that I would probably never have even considered had it not been for the times that we're in.
Right. You know, it's funny you mentioned the difference between piano and guitar. I don't know why this quote has stayed with me for 30 years, but Daryl Hall is getting interviewed, and he talked about piano, and he characterized it as a complete instrument. And he said, everyone should know piano. And he said, what I like about piano is that it's all there right in front of you. And I don't play piano, and I'm just an amateur guitar player. I'm not at your level, but I thought that was such a powerful statement. And he said all musicians should sort of pass through the piano realm, and it lays it out.
It's interesting that as well, because I don't want to keep going back to Springsteen, but he plays pretty mean. He plays pretty mean piano, you know. And
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's written a lot of his songs on piano, and he, on his solo tours, he's able to play. I mean, Brian Fallon of Gaslight Anthem, very, very similar. You know, they're both fantastic guitarists and songwriters, but they're both able to sometimes take the anthem,
right,
on guitar, and turn it into something different, and probably intimate, but as a result of it being intimate, maybe even more powerful.
Right.
When they've taken it onto piano, and it's a little bit softer, and you're obviously more attuned to the actual message that's being portrayed.
Absolutely. You know, when you go on a YouTube rabbit trail, you know, like one of my favorite things to do is take some of my favorite songs and listen and view different iterations or covers of them. Like Won't Get Fooled Again, when Pete, you know, he was doing all those acoustic versions of an arena rock song.
Right.
And who did it? Richie Blackmore has. And have you ever heard his version of Won't Get Fooled Again?
No, I haven't. I mean, I know Richie Blackmore. I've heard obviously in the Rainbow and those days. He's quite an eccentric as well, isn't he now?
Yeah, and he rearranged the whole song, and he did an amazing version of it.
Yeah, no, I'm a big fan of both, and you know, whilst in an ideal world, you know, we could keep playing the big rock anthems with the band. Of course, we don't know when the next opportunity to play live will be as a band.
Right.
Or even solo, you know, the open mic nights used to be the kind of lifeblood of the local sort of music community here in Hoboken, and I guess everywhere. And, you know, that's where, when I came over to New York last year, that's where I met my friends, because it's such a great community, isn't it? All you need to do is turn up with a guitar and bash out 2 or 3 songs, and you've made, you know, probably 10 or 12 new friends, and you can do that wherever you go.
It's true. I love your town, and I used to spend a fair amount of time there. I love your pronunciation of your town.
Why is it? Have I got it wrong? What do I say? Hoboken.
Well, yours is better. I will never call it Hoboken again. It sounds so crass. Hoboken. I love that. That's my shitty British accent.
No, we're going back to the Austin Powers again.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about that before we. Yeah, there we go.
That's it.
But no, but you're right. Music pulls people together. Music can absolutely, and you make friends. I've got this right here. This is an old picture of my buddies and I playing, and that's a little. We talk about it on the show. This is a little a little card we put in the student center, and I have friends I've had for 35 years because we play guitar, and these are friends I talk to multiple times a week.
Yeah, I mean, it's been the same. What was a joy for me putting the band together back home in the UK was the guitarist. We've got 3 guitarists. It sounds a bit intense. It's a bit Thin Lizzy-esque, but we've got. I play acoustic, and I've got.
I saw that.
2 lead guitars, and one of them was in the first band that I was in, and we kind of lost touch, so we probably hadn't seen each other for 25 years or something like that. And one day I just rang him up and said, "Hey, Nigel, I know I've not been in contact for a while, but
Yeah.
how do you fancy getting a band together?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, love to. It'd be great. It'd be great to catch up." And it was just like, just picked up as though, there'd been no time whatsoever between those moments. So,
It's great. You got
yeah,
you're literally like it's almost like a couple having a baby together when you create music, because you're creating something, and I'm being hokey, but not, you know.
no, I think that's the one thing that I miss. If I had the opportunity, I mean, we're recording at the moment, and I went back to the UK a couple of months ago just to visit friends and family, and I demoed as many songs as I possibly could while I was
Right.
there, and I left some of them with the guys to work on. So they're working on a few songs right now, but it's you're having to do things like you're doing things virtually, so the collaboration is really difficult, where
Yeah.
there's nothing better than just being in a room with a few beers or a bottle of wine or whatever it is, and you might go over some old stuff, but then you'll just jam around, or somebody will say, "I've got this new idea," or "I've got this riff," or I've got this beat," or whatever it may be, and collectively seeing what comes out of that.
Right.
If
And,
I could do that full time for a week, I would love to see what comes out.
I know, and even the little things like the ambient acoustics of a room. If you're fortunate to have a tube amplifier, and their sound is bleeding into your sound, and your sound is
Yeah,
bleeding into their sound, you physically feel it.
yeah.
From the kick drum or whatever.
It is
That.
one of the best feelings, and I know we got together a few times to do just that while we're
Yeah.
back. I think already in the UK, the lockdown is we're experiencing sadly a bit of a second wave. So I actually don't think that if I went home now, I'd be able to do what we did back then, because
Right.
you can't mix households anymore. So at least I went back at the right time. But there's a magic that happens if you've got gifted musicians with the same outlook and the
Yeah.
same kind of positivity, then anything can happen.
Yeah, and I guess to make the best of things, you have to make the best of things. And I think now, if we were to assume, which I hope and think we can, that things will be better and different at some point in the relatively near future, now you grab all those feelings and events and issues that are flying through the air, and then and you put your artistic, emotional, authentic spin on them into a song, and then you emerge with a catalog of things you've written during a really rough time, and then we could look back on it and reflect on it.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're right, and it's almost like a diary entry, isn't it? It's capturing a moment in time. But
Yes.
and it was something that was mentioned. One of the guys said about, because I got all these songs, and I mean, I've probably written at least 40, maybe 50 songs
Wow.
during lockdown, because I had nothing else to do. I
You're
got
doing
no
what you
friends.
should be doing now, though.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but this is what happens when you have no friends. You just keep writing songs.
Right,
so,
right, right.
so I kept doing that, but it was interesting. I think it was both Van Morrison, Adele. I remember reading her saying that you need to write 100 songs before you come out with anything that's worthwhile.
That's,
So,
yeah.
but there's a truth to it, because even with 50 songs, and there's probably 40 that are finished and maybe 10 that are still work in progress or whatever, but you get to them and you play them back, or you play them for other people, and they're not all great, but
Right.
there
They can't be.
are two or three
That's, yeah.
maybe that you just think, wait, hang on, we're really onto something here.
Right.
So, and maybe there's more than that, and
There
you end up
probably are. I mean,
but yeah, but I think that what the guys were trying to say is, so what's the theme? Almost like you said, what's the message? And it's not just COVID message or a lockdown or
yeah.
the racial tension or the politics of the day or whatever it is. There's almost like some kind of theme that binds all this together.
Yeah.
So think about that, and that's
Absolutely.
something that I've been kind of wrestling with over the last few weeks since I got back.
Well, and the thing is, we as a society need artists to do that for us. I mean, it's essential.
Yeah,
Uh, like, help me, the song "Something Happening Here," what it is, I can't.
I
What?
know the one you mean. what it is ain't exactly.
Signs. It's not signs, but it's.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I know it'll come to us when we finished, but I know we want.
As soon as we stop recording. But so my point in that reference is that, so I think you and I are probably about the same age. So I was born in the '60s, but I don't remember the '60s.
Sure.
I hear that song, and an artist brings me back to that period of time during the protests in the '60s. Your job for our children and perhaps generations beyond them is to capture the import of what's been happening now. Set it to music, art. It could be a book. For you, it's music. For other people, it could be a movie. It could be a screenplay. It could be anything. And then you capture it, and then that's there forever. And people can look back on this time and emotionally study it.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you kind of, you feel it personally as well, because you reflect on the work that you've done and what were you feeling at that time, or what were your emotions? It might be personal emotions, and kind of the messages in the work that I've done. There's 2 albums there and an EP, and the first album was just genuine excitement to be able to be actually doing something I'd always dreamed of doing. So there's a little bit of a mishmash of everything I could possibly think of. And then the second time around, I think, got a little bit more considered, but it was still an air of excitement about it. But there was a feeling when I look back on that now of, I was volunteering in a homeless shelter in my hometown for young people. Okay. And I met some incredible people in there, and I had some time. I took some time off work to just concentrate on playing music and writing. And I also wrote. It's funny you say about the screenplay. I wrote a play, musical about homelessness called Streets of Your Town, and it was almost like a story that could be played out in Blackpool, my hometown, but it's universal. It could be played out in London. It could be played out in New York. It's a story that is happening everywhere. And so when you say that, I look back to a couple of years ago about that period where I felt I was capturing something that was specifically going on in my town. But sadly, it's still a huge problem wherever you go, and particularly in New York. So it's still applicable now. So
and that's the relevance of what you're doing now and what you've done,
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's more about just, trying to raise some awareness as well, because people choose their way of looking at the world, and maybe when things are okay for them, they don't specifically want to be looking out at what other people are having problems with or wrestling with. And there was the last album was called There Is Always Hope. And
kind of like Promise, right? Kind of like your name, Promise.
And it was so interesting, because it was partly because my sister, she probably will never watch this, so I can talk about it. She'd been talking about my work in the homeless shelter, and I thought she was positive about it. And she was saying how in her town, she wrote to the mayor about the homeless problem, and there's lots of people sleeping rough in shop doorways, store doorways, and what have you. But she was actually writing to the mayor to complain that it shouldn't be happening in her town. Not that we should be doing anything about it.
Right.
This is wrong. We are not the other town, which is Blackpool, which is much more, working class. This is a much more affluent area. We shouldn't be experiencing this. So that was one thing about, open your eyes to what the problem is. But I also, I went to Glasgow when my daughter was at university, and it was a Monday night. It was a really rainy, sort of drizzly, dreek night, as they would call it.
Aren't they all like that over there?
They're all like that. That's a summer evening, actually, in Scotland.
Right. It's a beautiful summer night.
Yeah, it was actually January, and you can imagine there was hardly anyone about. Middle of January, 8 o'clock in the evening. I was waiting for a train, and the Central Station is right in the centre of town. And I was just walking to the station, and I heard somebody singing, like somebody busking, and it was amplified. And I followed it because it sounded gorgeous. It was quite a haunting sort of melody, and it was a guy playing, and he was playing amplified voice and his guitar, but it was absolutely beautiful. And it turns out he was from Eastern Europe, and he could barely speak English, but he was just smiling, like, and he was. I worked out from him that he was over in Scotland. He thought he had some family in Liverpool or in London, and he was trying to get money together to go and look for them. But he kind of had nothing, and he was playing. There was nobody around. It was, you know, barely 40
Just
degrees.
for the joy of the music.
And he was playing, and all he could say while he was smiling, this was I swear, this is the only thing he actually said that I could understand. There is always hope.
Wow. Wow.
And that, like, to me, was just so powerful.
Wow.
And I thought, if this guy who's got nothing in a country where he knows no one,
Yeah.
can sit playing his guitar in the middle of the town centre in the dead of night in winter, but he's smiling and there's always hope and, you know, come on, let's go. Let's stay positive. Then, wow, if he can do it, we all can.
Yeah. You just, so a couple of things. First of all, as is always the case on our show, time friggin' flies. I just looked at my clock on my computer. We've been chatting for 40 minutes and it feels like 5. And yeah. And secondly, what a great positive way to sort of round things out. I could talk to you for hours, and maybe someday in real life we will.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. You never know. But no, I appreciate it. It's great to talk to you and even just reflect because, you know, we're, as you say, we're of a certain age, aren't we? And we don't often talk about some of these things and some of the kind of influences. And it's got me, just having the conversation has kind of got me thinking, well, so yeah, how did we get here? You know?
Yeah. I love,
did it come to this?
I love, you know, I love our chats on this show about the artistic process. And I keep coming back to this wonderful guy, Alex Scooby, who is a guitar player, and that was our excuse to put him on, but he's really an actor. And we put him on Zoom, so he was one of our earlier Zoom shows. He said the exact same things you're saying. He keeps himself sane with creative projects. For him, it's writing. Yeah. You know, I have a shitty screenplay under my belt because I only wrote one. They say you have to write 5 to be good.
Right. Okay.
But he was an actor version of you. So you know what? You know, I love that we can talk on this show about sort of the human artistic process and how these times where I can't have you in the studio, which I'd prefer. Yeah. You know, how you can make them great in a sense, because I think that what I'm hearing from a lot of the folks we chat with is that it's almost like there's a spike in creativity because of this forced solitude. Are you feeling that?
Yes, for me personally, but I know friends of mine who have gone exactly the other way.
Yeah.
The one thing I'll say to that there's also something about working keeps you sharp. And, you know, it's like a bit like the old Woody Guthrie and in Bound for Glory, which is an incredible book where about, you know, stay hard, stay hungry, stay alive, all that kind of stuff, which Bruce picked up on. But there is something about that because I did take a bit of time off work in between projects. I work in design and construction. Okay. And it was basically, you almost sometimes have too much time. Mm-hmm. And I found that towards the end of that period, I went a little bit soggy and nothing really happened. And I felt like a little bit like jelly, you know?
Yeah.
Where when I was thinking when I came to New York and I started work again, I'm never going to have time to be writing music but the actual energy that I got from being involved, working again and working with people and being part of a team actually sparked creativity as well. So you need to strike a balance.
Yeah. Well, if you're working, life is happening to you. And, you know, and you know, like the other day, I'm a lawyer by day. That's what that's what keeps my lights on. And I spent 9 straight hours in front of my computer in one day writing a 30-page brief. You know, and that you could lose your mind doing that.
Sure.
And I'll sometimes hop in the car and drive. There's a river near me, and I'll just look at the river for a little bit, and then I feel a little rejuvenated.
And do you write as well?
I wrote about 6 chapters of a book.
Yeah.
That went nowhere, and I wrote a really objectively bad screenplay.
Right. But songs, sorry, you don't put that to your own songs.
Now, I have probably, I think I wrote two or three songs in my
Right.
songwriting non-career. So I do have a couple of songs under my belt. But, from a musician point of view, I was garage bands in high school, bands in college, bands in law school, and I like to play now. But
Yeah.
I'm always clear on the show. I'm on a very different level than my guests. You know,
Well,
I'm comfortable on guitar, but not at the same level.
yeah.
But I
I
love
mean,
it.
I think that's the point. Is what you love and what you enjoy
Yeah.
about the process. And for me, I would love to be. There's a guy who I really admire, War on Drugs, the band, and he writes all his music and he produces it and he
Yeah.
records it himself at home. And I would love to be able to do that, but I just haven't got the patience and the
Yeah.
chops to be able to do all the technology. So whilst I would love to be able to do it, I'm not going to waste any energy in trying to master it because I'm not wired that way.
Right.
What I love doing is writing and creating. So I'll leave it to somebody else to do the technology, and I'll do what I love, which is, sitting on a bench coming up with lyrics, or playing the piano in the dark and coming up with a melody, or plugging a guitar in and seeing what, crash out a few chords and rhythm and see what happens. That's where I get my energy from.
Yeah. And I could say with 100% certainty, having chatted with you for a while now, everything you do is authentic. I could just tell. And that's in the same line, I'm more familiar with Bruce than with Joe Strummer, but you're doing it right, and if you emote organically, you create the great works you're already doing. So you're gonna, when you're eventually able to be around people again, you're gonna have. I'm sure you're wrong that there's only two or three good songs out of the 40 or 50. There's probably at least 10 or 15. You're gonna have a
Yeah,
whole
maybe.
catalog of really good stuff, you know.
Yeah, yeah, I hope so, and I think as we said before, it's almost like it's a way of capturing this moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's a way of documenting it. It's almost like a diary entry. This was me in 2020,
Yeah.
and the first album was 2017, and I make some references to 2017 that I can picture that was a certain time. We had terrorist attacks in the UK, and
All right. Yeah.
elements of that was picked up. So the music, I listen to the music and it takes me to that place. And I quite like that out of the artists that I admire and that I listen to. So if I can do a fraction of that, then, I'm happy.
I'm confident you will. So let me ask one last question. So you're Johnny Bullet and the Promise. I already know the answer, but I want you to tell us. How do people find you?
Well, we can be found on all of the major platforms, the usual, on Spotify and Apple Music, YouTube. I'll be honest, and I think I mentioned it to you in our initial correspondence,
Yeah.
a bit like the technology, I am hopeless at keeping up to date with social media. You kind of, it's that thing, that kind of passed us by, didn't it, in many respects?
Oh,
And
it did.
it's
Yeah, like
something,
I'm worthless on Instagram. I don't even understand it. I'm on it
yeah,
a little bit. I don't get it.
yeah, I don't do that either, but it's unfortunate that that's the way it goes. But I'm just happy that the music's out there. It's on, as I say, it's on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. We even have CDs. We actually did some
What are
CDs
those?
for those people that still have a CD player.
Yeah.
But I still buy CDs and vinyl, and I'll never stop doing it. And for me, it's unfortunate that people only ever maybe listen to a track.
Yeah.
We would never have got into a band like The Clash that would have been so important to us in our lives if we
Yeah.
only listened to one song.
No, I know. And just the
We bought,
tactile feel of the cardboard of the album
yeah,
cover.
we bought into everything that they stood for. So
Yeah.
I think, obviously that part is lost, but the music's still out there, and I still love playing live. And when that day comes, there's no better feeling than I mean, I always love playing in a covers band, but there's no better feeling than playing live to
Yeah.
play your songs and
Yeah.
putting your music out there.
I will
Um,
come see you at Maxwell's if it still exists. Maxwell's still
no,
around?
do you know, it's funny. I nearly mentioned Maxwell's earlier as how things have moved on. Believe it or not, I saw a note that came through today on one of the local emails or something that it's now turned into a seafood restaurant.
Oh no.
It's just about to open. I'm like, what's going on with the world?
Oh no, all I could say is when I was at Maxwell's over 20 years ago, I don't remember when I was at Maxwell's over 20 years ago. It was one of those kind of nights.
Yeah.
But this has been absolutely wonderful. I've really enjoyed you on the show. This is
Thanks,
great.
thanks, Dave.
And
It's been great. Thank you for having me.
oh, absolute pleasure. So you have a wonderful night. I'm going to hit stop on the recording, which I don't need to say. I should just do it, but that's how we are here. All right, goodbye, everyone, and have a great night. We'll see you next time on Guitar Tales.